So, how would you define an expensive versus a cheap car, automobile? What's an example of an expensive automobile? A Maserati? What's an expensive or cheap automobile?
An expensive cheap one?
No, cheap automobile. A Ford. Okay. Well, what I would argue is that some cars are expensive for what you get, and some cars are cheap for what you get. So, for example, no, my wife's car is cheap, and it's cheap for what you get. It's both. She's a Chrysler. It's the most horrible car in the universe. But like what a lot of people argue is they'll argue that, say, a Mercedes-Benz is actually not such an expensive car because it includes maintenance and it will last forever. So therefore, a Mercedes-Benz is a pretty economical car to buy. A Maserati or Ferrari, on the other hand, is a very expensive car to buy. Why? Because the maintenance is very expensive, and the fact is that the car was engineered not to last very long. I mean, they're beautiful cars, but show me someone whose Ferrari who gets 100,000 miles out of their Ferrari, right? That's just impossible to do. The car will self-destruct before 100,000 miles. It's just designed that way, or a Maserati is designed the same way. It's just not engineered to be driven for a long period of time. So the way to think about it is a little bit different then. That some cars, how about say a Hyundai, right? A Hyundai is known as a car that's very inexpensive to drive. And yet it's well made and it will last a long time. Hence, a Hyundai is an inexpensive car because you're getting a lot of car for your money. Another way to look at it is, right? I used to have when I started working here, was I working here? Or did I get rid of it? Yeah, I think I was working here. I had a 1990 Mercury Grand Marquis. Yeah, when I was working here. And the thing, it was huge. It was like, it was a barge, and it was great. And and I paid $700 for it. So I argue that that is the ultimate cheap car. Because if you take the weight of my car and divide by the price, or take the price and divide by the weight, that car cost me like, $1 a pound or something, right? Whereas if you buy, you do the same math on a Mercedes or on a BMW, right? A BMW will easily cost you what? $10 a pound? Very little car for the money from that perspective. Yeah.
But would they actually try to make the car as light as possible for the reason?
So then it's going to get even more expensive per pound, right?
Yeah. But lighter is better.
Of course, lighter is better. But let's say you have a $40,000 car that weighs 3,000. How much do you think that BMW weighs? Let's say it weighs 3,000 pounds. That's $13 a pound. Now my Acura cost me $6,400, and it probably weighs, let's say it weighs 3,000 pounds. That's $2 a pound. Not a bad deal, right? But if you were to go and buy a Ford, right? A Ford's going to be very cheap, like per pound. You probably can't. And a used Ford, right? Look for a used Ford, a used Lincoln, right? A used Mercury, and you're talking very, very cheap. Why do I say this? Because stocks are very much the same way. It's not about the actual price of the stock itself. It's about what you're getting for your money. Because you can have a stock that's very high priced, but in fact you're getting a lot. You have a very profitable company, and the company has a lot of assets. So it's actually pretty cheap because you're getting a lot of company for your money. On the other hand, you could have a stock that you would consider to be very expensive. This stock is, let's say, $560 a share. Or like Uber, right? The company isn't profitable. So that means that a share of Uber stock is pretty expensive because you're not getting very much company there. You're getting the promise. Let's look that up. Let's see what Uber's trading at today.
Wait, what's Uber?
It's some new, isn't it? Is it?
Taxi service? Isn't it?
Yeah, it's this. It's an online. It's an app that you can.
You can like get the app and then you like tell a car to pick you up and then you pay like through your phone.
Oh.
It's only in Boston and New York City.
Oh, maybe it didn't sell. Uber's $18 billion valuation. But I don't understand why it's not listed in Finance Google. Anyway, the idea is if you look at a company on the other hand, let's see, price. Look at something that's probably, let's look at Apple because Apple's pretty interesting. Apple's at $93, okay? They just did a stock split and they did a major dividend a little while ago and that cut the price. Here you can see the here you go, they paid a dividend then. I think there was a stock split somewhere along here. But anyway, Apple's trading at $93. You might say it's a pretty expensive stock. But in fact, it earns $6 a share, which is very high. So when you do the PE ratio, the PE ratio comes out to be $15.67. That's about normal. You're looking for PE ratios usually. A normal PE ratio is usually between like 12 and 18, 10 and 20, somewhere around there. That would be a normal price stock. So even though the stock price is $93, they have a normal PE ratio, meaning that it's a pretty reasonable value. It's not overpriced, not underpriced. And that's really what you want. On the other hand, you may see companies with a very low PE ratio. Let's say a company has a PE ratio below 10. That means it's a cheap stock. There's not much, it's not very expensive to buy the stock in comparison to how much it's earning. So let me see if I can find one that would be pretty cheap. I don't know. Union Pacific. No, see that P ratio, Union Pacific is still $20. Still 20. Keurig Green Mountain, there's P ratio of 32. So Keurig, the price is pretty high, but that's not what we look at. We look at the P ratio. The P ratio is a giant 32, is very high. So that would tell you that this is an expensive stock. You would want to be skeptical before you invest in that company. There is, by the way, here you go, Microsoft is 15, meaning that it's about average level of expensiveness. There is, by the way, one company that never splits its stock. Do you know what it is? Berkshire Hathaway.
What's that right now? Over 1,000, right?
This is the Class B stock. Where's Class A? I don't know. Here we go. This is Class B stock, which they have split. Here we go. Class A stock. It's trading at $191,726. So Berkshire Hathaway, Class A. So if you bought a share of their stock in the 70s for, $20 or something like that, today it would be worth $191,000. And they have never split their stock on principle. What they did do is they created their Class B stock, which does split. And that's for more middle-class shareholders like us. With $127 is what it's trading at right now. And I don't know why, I think the PE ratio is really just artificial here because here you can see Berkshire's PE ratio is 16. So this PE ratio usually ranges between 10 and 20. If you see one above 20, that means the company doesn't quite have the earnings to justify the price. So therefore, probably what's going on is investors expect a lot of earnings in the future. They expect earnings to go up. The story with Keurig Green Mountain is that they have a new deal to make, you know, Keurig Green Mountain, they have those little K-cups and stuff. Does anyone know why their earnings are expected to go up? So they have an exclusive deal with Coke to make Coke capsules.
And Coca-Cola.
Yeah, with Coca-Cola products. And what you're going to be able to do is buy a machine in the store, and you just put the capsule in, you hit the button, and it makes you a glass of Coca-Cola or well, I doubt it's going to make you Pepsi, but Coca-Cola or Sprite or Diet Coke or one of the other Coke products. Yeah, this is the new thing. So, isn't that great? So, and you don't have to then schlep around the big cans and bottles. You just put one in and turn it on, and I guess it'll also, you know, make the water cold and stuff exactly the way you want it. So that's why their stock price is up, is everybody's anticipating that product. So they're anticipating a new product and a lot of future earnings that ups your PE ratio. That's why the stock is so expensive. On the other hand, if you buy a company that, and I'm trying to find one here and I just can't think of one off the top of my head. If you buy a stock that no one is too excited about, there's one, Lee Enterprises. The PE ratio is 0 because they had a loss. So if you have a loss, then you can't really measure your PE ratio anymore. But we're going to look at those, and it's really important to think of those as you work on your company. So let's look at this. Refer to EPS and market price information. We can see here that Atar has a PE ratio of 12, while WAGD has a PE ratio of 30. A PE ratio below 10 is considered a bargain, whereas a PE ratio of 20 is considered expensive. Measured by PE ratio, Atar's company stock is, yeah, it's a bargain, or maybe it's moderately priced, while WAGD company stock is expensive. And it all depends, you know, which one should you buy? It really depends on your judgment. You may decide, you may be the type of person who says, I want to go for the more expensive stock because everybody is very excited about it. And, you know, I want to buy Green Mountain because they're going to come out with this new product and I'm going to make a lot of money. Or you might avoid those companies and believe more in, I'm going to buy a company with a low PE ratio with the hope that it's going to go up. And so, EPS can be more meaningful when it's compared because they use that to calculate PE.